Hey, good morning, everyone. Today we don't have our usual DJ, Andrew. So, hey, Tim.
Hey guys, good morning.
So we'll just give it a couple of more minutes and we can start. And today, I think we'll just have a very quick technical update, and then if anybody has any questions, we can go over it. But uh, I know it's Christmas week, so I'll keep it short and sweet so that you guys get back to what you need to get back to. Okay, so it's 3 after. So what I'm going to do is that I'll just quickly share this week's updates, and then I can basically go over the chat and basically kind of see if there are any questions and answer them. So, so it's been like a busy week for us. We've been kind of being pulled in multiple directions, but I'll just explain to you what's going on. First is basically, if you remember last week, we released the log4j scan, which basically was looking at Java processes and then essentially figuring out class paths and giving data about log4j instances that are there. And then basically we got feedback from a lot of you, which said that you wanted to basically find things in the file system and it was not sufficient. So you were looking at tools, etc. So what we've done is we basically gone in and basically implemented what is called the log4j deep scan. So this basically kind of shows you like how we are running it. We basically have a tool. So basically what it does is it's not like a file system scan like you normally do in the user space. This uses basically the master file table on NTFS, and it also basically looks at the inodes on the Linux machines and Mac to basically figure out the files that are present on the system and pulls the data from that. So we can complete basically very large drives in basically 30 to 45 seconds, because otherwise if you're scanning for the entire file system, it takes hours together. So basically we didn't want to do that. So this will basically scan all directly connected drives. So if it's a mounted drive or basically a remote network share, it will not scan those drives. But our hope is that those drives can be scanned in the point of origin where you're basically sharing it from. So over there, you'll be able to get this data. But this basically is where we are rolling out this patch right now. So you should basically be able to run these scans in the next couple of hours. Second is that we ran into a limitation on the certificates for, especially for people who were needing new instances, because Let's Encrypt basically has a limitation of 50 certificates per week and does not basically allow you to go above it. There's no such thing as a paid plan, etc. So what we are basically moved towards is basically a wildcard certificate for all of the instances that are in the cloud, and we will essentially kind of have them go through that. And so that way, what happens is that we don't have the backlog of systems requiring certificates, which basically are not provisioned. So that's the second piece that we basically implemented. Third is basically there is one issue that has cropped up in the last 2 weeks. This has happened ever since AWS has had multiple downtimes in different regions. The instances that we are running on basically lose IP address and are becoming unreachable. And we basically kind of work with AWS on this. They have 3 P1 support tickets basically working on this based on different instances that have come to us. There is at least 4 of the partners who have reported this problem. The problem that occurs is all of a sudden ETH0 on the machine will essentially kind of lose its IP address and go down. It will basically not get an IP address. So while the machine is running and all the services are running, it is not reachable from outside, and we cannot essentially get SSH console access to the machine. So the only way out of this is to basically reboot the machine. So AWS has considered this as a high priority ticket, and we're getting updates every 3 hours, but they have not found a solution to it. We are in the process of implementing a workaround, which is basically what we are doing is that we are doing our own check of an outbound check from the instance to see if the outside world is reachable or not. We are basically pinging a server. If it is not pinging, one of the things that we're attempting to do is to basically first reset the Ethernet on the machine. And if that Ethernet reset basically solves the problem, it's fine. If that reset also fails, then we essentially are forcing the reboot of the machine. So this script is basically being pushed to all the instances right now. So hopefully that will essentially kind of at least mitigate the problem. It won't mitigate the problem, but it will basically mitigate the symptom, and basically the downtime becomes less in terms of us having to basically kind of intrude into the whole system. So that essentially is being rolled out now. So that way we should not see those issues crop up. You will see probably sometimes like for a minute or two that the system is not accessible, but it should get accessible after that time. And as soon as AWS basically gives us a resolution for that, I will basically post a message so that all of you are aware of this. The next thing which we kind of something that everybody's been asking us for is basically a standard default template, which is a global template for all the ticket integrations or email integrations, etc. So now we basically have the ability to define a default template. So this default template will be used for all the companies, unless otherwise you basically want to override it for a particular company. So this way you don't need to go and set up credentials for each and every company. And again, when you set up the credentials, you can set up the template. You can set up, for example, the service boards, etc. once, and then use it for all the companies instead of having to define it at every company. This was another feature that was basically requested, which is the ability to download the asset level report. So we now have a new icon over here, which essentially, if you click on it, you will get a complete asset level report, which will essentially kind of give you all the data that you see on that report, including how it was discovered, what is the compliance, non-compliance, what are the patches. All of this data for that particular asset will essentially kind of come up there. So this basically has been done. Next one is that in case you have SSO integrated with your system, one of the problems we have is that when you run the assessment agent basically is running locally. So it cannot essentially call out to the your SSO system. So in that particular case, it was not working for quite a few people. So we essentially have given the ability for you to put in your client ID and client secret, which you can generate on the UI. And then basically, once you get these two and put it in there, it will start working. And it's a one-time process. So once you do it once, then for subsequent assessments, you don't need to, if you're doing it on the same machine, like a laptop, etc., you can just use it continuously, and then you don't need to kind of rekey this in every time there's an assessment. And then, so you can basically click validate, and then you basically get into it, and it gets the configuration. The next thing that was requested by a lot of you, I've actually, I think Andrew has sent an email on this, which is basically we believe that this is not so reliable, but a lot of folks basically wanted the ability to essentially be able to scan for the Log4j vulnerability from an external scan perspective. So all you need to do is that when you are setting up the scan, you basically set up the Log4j email notification settings. And if you set this up, then essentially what happens is that you will get an email, which because we're using the concept of canary tokens, And this will basically trigger an email, and this will give you like which IP address and what basically is vulnerable to log4j. So the way that this works is that our external scanner, when it basically scans a particular asset that you've provided us, it registers an ID with canary tokens. It then basically kind of, when it scans the asset for the log4j configuration in the user agent and headers, we essentially kind of put that ID in there and basically provide the canary tokens domain name, unique domain name with that ID. And then this asset will essentially call back to canary tokens if log4j, if that vulnerability is in there. And then you basically get notified via email, okay? We will be building the next step of basically integrating this via webhook back into the system itself. But given that everybody was wanted this very quickly, we essentially integrated this and released this yesterday. So this is already there in your system today. So this basically has been what we've been working on this week. So if there are any questions, etc., then we can basically answer those questions. So I'm just going to open the chat window here. So does the new log4j require installed LW agents, or does it work with network scans? It will work with network scans also, Dennis, because in the network scan also, we are basically moving the data over SMB, and then we are running the process locally. So we are still able to access the master file table on the machine. And this does not affect the microservices architecture because it stays, all of this stuff is basically on the agent side, right? So basically on the server side, it really does not have an effect on it.
Yeah, sorry, I meant that in relation to the issue with the Amazon losing its IP addresses.
No, it won't affect the microservices-based architecture. This is because we have separate instances. That's where we are facing this issue.
Okay.
Do lightweight agents auto-upgrade themselves? Yes, Craig, they do auto-upgrade themselves. And basically, the one thing that you need to notice, like a lot of people are using lightweight agents as one-time scanners and basically deleting them after it. So in that particular case, when you run it the next time, that's when it will upgrade. So it will not be like it is just auto-updated and data will come through. Can you run through, Paul? It's very simple, Paul. There are two modes of log4j scanning. One is basically like when you run a normal scan, in a couple of hours, what you will see is that you will actually see a dashboard that's populated in front, which shows you all the locations of the log4j jars which are vulnerable. Okay. Second is that once that log4j, if you want to basically set up an external scan for log4j, all you need to do is to go into settings and basically enter the email address where you want to be notified. And when you do an external scan, it automatically, if that email address is present, it basically kind of goes and does it puts in that string so that it will basically generate a canary token and then basically pushes the data to the canary token. So that's basically the sequence. Craig, that feature basically, because of all the updates that we put together, we couldn't basically get the QA to test it, but we are hoping to basically complete that in tomorrow. Basically, we have all the code ready. It's just going to be tested tomorrow. So don't show updates as vulnerable if it's less than 30 days. That is the SLA feature that we already have. So basically, you can define an SLA for any patch updates. And after the patch is released, X number of days, it will essentially not show in the reports, etc., but it will essentially show in your vulnerability list. ZB, the internal systems that can't have a lightweight agent installed, you still can basically get the data via the probe. And we basically released also the external scan agent in case you don't have access to the credentials or you can't get to them via probe. My probe agents keep going offline. Ali, I've actually seen your ticket. The probe agent is not supposed to go offline. We are basically looking at why it is going offline. And today there are 3 specific fixes that we have essentially released. And we will observe your system for the next 3 or 4 days. And if everything seems stable, then I believe that with the fixes that we released today, you will see a improved uptime for those pieces. Dennis, auditing user access, we have not finished it. We have the data, but we just have to create the UI with all the stuff that's going on with Log4j and all the requests. We were kind of stuck with that. So I will get that whole thing done. So the internal probe is scanning for the vulnerability as well. Yes, ZB. It is basically scanning for that vulnerability. It is basically pushing that small executable. It's basically a few KB to the remote system and basically scanning that local system and figuring out whether Log4j is over there. Can we get an explanation of how insecure listening ports under security report card and how it's created and how the firewall affects the rating? So essentially, when you basically define any ports which are basically insecure, so you have the ability to define your own set of ports to say that these ports are considered insecure if it is open, right? So if any of the ports fall into that, then we essentially kind of grade you as being low. If basically you have no insecure ports open and all the ports are basically whitelisted ports, then we grade you as basically being good. So that's basically how we are grading it. Dennis, was there anything else that I'm missing over here?
I don't remember exactly what my question was, so I'd have to go back and look at it.
Okay, perfect.
This is Larry. I would ask the question. So I guess does an enabled, so the lightweight agent is what's showing the insecure listening ports. Does the firewall, an enabled firewall, change that grading in any way, shape, or form?
That's a good question, Larry. I think I will basically say the point is that we are looking with the lightweight agent, we are basically looking at all the processes that are listening to ports. And I think we are assuming that all of those ports are visible outside. So while you're saying that the firewall is enabled and the rules are enabled, we need to basically go back and look at the rules to figure out what actual ports are basically exposed outside. So
yeah, because we've got the firewall set up so there's no ports accessible from the outside, but yet we get a grade of 1 on the insecure listening ports.
Larry, I'll take that as a bug under the system, especially for lightweight agents, because I agree with what you're saying. If the firewall is not allowing any of those ports to be exposed, then we should essentially not be marking it as insecure. So in that particular case, that's a wrong data that is coming there. We will fix that up. I'm just putting it down and I'll take it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, if you're looking at netstat and looking at internal ports, that's a tricky thing to try to fix, I think.
Yeah, I think Dennis, the only way to do that is basically we'll kind of read what are the firewall rules for Windows. We'll pass them because there is a module that's available, I think, in like the OS query, which allows us to read it. So I can then parse it and then I can make a determination on the server side saying, okay, I saw these ports, but basically all of them are blocked. So I don't need to basically worry about it. So Mark on probe offline. Yeah, so this basically has occurred to us a few times. This is the thing that we are basically, so what we've done, as I explained to you a couple of weeks back, the assessment agent was an agent that was rewritten where we basically have, we don't use Nmap for port probes and all of those pieces. And we basically kind of limited the use of external processes. And now earlier, basically, we were copying almost like 6 or 7 different types of files over to remote systems, etc. All of them has been removed, and basically we've limited it to just 2 files, which essentially we copy to remote systems. So with that, we basically are now migrating all the existing agent and the lightweight agents to the code base that we use for the assessment agent, which basically fixes multiple things. One is what we talked about. Second, as I spoke about earlier, the incremental updates on assets, which means that if there is no change in the asset, it will not push back any data. It will basically say that there is no change on that asset, and keeping the intelligence at the agent level rather than basically moving it to the server level. So these fixes basically we have already put in there, and we are working towards basically releasing that agent towards the early part of next week. And once that is released, then basically most of these agent offline issues at least should go away, especially if it is because of hung processes, because sometimes what happens is we spawn off an Nmap process to basically do a scan, and then we kind of lose control over it. And at that point of time, basically, since we are kind of waiting on the handle for it, it basically doesn't release it. We've tried timeouts, but Nmap sometimes seems to be in a position where you cannot even kill that process. So that's the reason we basically went in to write this new agent. And I'm hoping that after next week, we should not have even these sporadic issues of being probe offline. Paul, I'll check your instance and basically see why your instance is not propagating the log4j. I'll basically send you an email right after this call. Brandon, as I said, what we basically were doing is that we're looking at the processes table earlier. Right now, after we make this release, the release in the next hour or so, once it runs, you will be able to see that you will be able to see the log4j directly. So there should be no problem.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mark, why yes, we can list the ports, but external scan should be the one that lists multiple ports. This will work if essentially you're basically, because the external scan agent runs from the internet, so basically that's fine. But even internally, you want to make sure that if you want to make sure that between machines that ports are not open, and that is a requirement from some of the standards that you have, right, like CIS, etc. So maybe we can basically define this as a setting. So depending on whether you choose, you want to basically perform an internal, an equivalent of an external scan on the internal machines or not, we'll essentially allow you to kind of grade it or not grade it. So I will basically add that as a feature that we need to put it back there.
Shiv, is it possible to mark ports as safe internal only or external only or both?
Right now, we have given only one setting. I will basically kind of separate it out and basically give a separate section for external scan and internal scans.
Okay.
Then yes, actually we were supposed to get it released, but with all the log4j and the associated work that has come in, we've not been able to kind of spend time on it. Tim, can you tell me what is it, a mechanism to have alternate probes?
Yeah, so as you were talking about probes earlier, I mean, a probe may be offline just because the computer is offline. So I'm thinking about maybe a small environment that only has PCs and one PC is off, but we wouldn't want to miss that probe. So if we could have the ability to have a second PC, maybe at the location be an alternate probe, then that would alleviate some of the issues that we have whenever a probe is offline and we're not getting those full scans.
Okay, so basically we define a particular probe. These two probes basically are paired probes, and both of them will use the same settings, just that if one is offline, the other will take over, correct?
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Okay, I've got that in my list. Ali, I'll basically work with you to get something resolved as quickly as possible. I'll basically work on an update so that by tomorrow, by today, in a few hours or tomorrow early morning, you will have an update on why it is going offline. And if there is a fix, we'll be pushing that fix to your instance. Paul, you can just go and delete an asset, right? So you can just go to the asset, you click on the asset and you click delete, you can delete the asset and it'll go away. Ryan says, is there a way to see log4j detections across all clients in one place? I'll make this available as a one global dashboard where you can see all of this. While on the active asset section of the table view, is there a way to save your view when you add or remove columns? Yes, there is. You can basically choose which columns you want to save. You can change the order and you can save it. There is basically a button call where you can basically do this. ZB, you're asking, is there a global remediation plan at MSP level? Yes, ZB, that's been there for a very long time. You can essentially go to the global settings, you will see remediation plan, and then you will see all the remediations. And then when you click through it, you can essentially see all assets that are affected by that remediation. So I'll take back that the global dashboard is something that a lot of people need. So basically, we'll make that live tomorrow morning, and we'll work on the other pieces. Paul, yes, your save button, if it's not working, then I'll have one of my engineers basically connect to your system and basically check it out. And we'll figure out if there is some specific problem or is it basically issue that we can resolve. So I think I'm caught up with all the questions. Can you show the global remediation plan? Yes, just give me a minute. Share the screen. So, ZB, when you basically go to, here is basically the normal screen, which is basically company specific. If you essentially go to the global view, right, and then here you can essentially see remediation plan. And here you can see all the remediations across all the companies. And then when you get into this details, it tells you which company, how many vulnerabilities, and which asset basically you have to basically fix this for. So look at this. So this is this company, how many vulnerabilities, and which asset in that company you can basically kind of drill down into. So this is basically the global remediation plan.
And you mentioned you're going to add log4j to that dashboard?
Yes.
Okay.
Hey, Shiva, I tried to go there. I'm getting an error, 500 error, but that might be specific to our instance or something.
Yeah, ZB, I will basically have my engineer check it right now and send you a mail on what's happening there.
Okay. And then the other thing was, what's the best way for some of my guys to sign up for this weekly call?
There is a link. I can basically, ZB, send you this link, and I'll basically send the calendar invite also. So if you can just send me the list of emails of people who want to be on this call, I can basically send the invite to all of them.
Okay.
Craig, that's going to be mid of January for third-party patching, because the next week basically we're basically going to be doing the migration to the new infrastructure, and then once that is basically done, then we're going to start working on the next sprint starting from the first week of Jan. So I believe that in the first sprint we are taking two things. One, by the way, one of the things that I don't know if you guys noticed, but CIS has been upgraded to 8.0. So all the compliance reports are basically now CIS 8.0 reports. And we basically got in the first week of Jan, the release, we're going to basically have the Super 8 from Australia, that standard, as well as basically the UK standard, basically both of them in there. So those two are basically part of that standard.
I think I missed the part about the third-party patching. That's a new function that's coming into CyberCNS to be able to do third-party patching or scanning for the vulnerabilities?
No, we already scanned for vulnerabilities, ZB, but we are basically, we basically have already created a repository with Chocolatey for third-party applications, where we have more than 2,440 applications which are basically available today. So we basically are going to give the ability for you to basically push patches out for third-party applications centrally from within CyberCNS. And the phase 2 is basically where we will integrate with your RMM to push the same patches.
Okay, where can I get some more information on that?
Let me know what information you need, Tim, and I have previous slide sets where we actually demonstrated how the patching will be done. I can basically send that over to you.
That'd be good to start with, yeah.
Perfect. So I think we're all caught up. So if there are no other questions, then I want to wish all of you a very, very Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year. I want to basically also say a big thank you for what each one of you have been contributing towards this particular product. And we basically are indebted to you. And just a final update is that tomorrow morning, as we announced earlier, all of the folks who basically had the partner stock, the stock options, basically, those are being rolled out tomorrow morning. So you will actually get a contract in your mail, and please basically fill out the details in that and send it back to us. The mail will come directly from me because I'm supposed to do it as the officer of the company. And please basically send it back to me. And once it is signed, then basically allotment certificates will be sent to each of you. So as I said, basically this is the last call for the year. And I want to thank each one of you for basically all the assistance that you have provided us and being patient with us when we have had issues, etc. So wish you a very, very Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year.
Hey, Shiva, who do those emails go to?
Pardon, ZB?
Or you mentioned like this email you're talking about going out tomorrow for partner shares and whatever. Who do those go to? Like, I don't know that I've ever get any emails for CyberCNS.
We have a list, ZB, so you will actually get it. So all the people who have contributed towards the product, they are all basically getting those emails. So ZB, your name is also there on that list. So
okay, thanks.
So thank you, everyone, and basically have a great holiday season and see you all in the new year.
Thanks, Shiva.